You're listening to international investment advisor Doug Goldstein on the Goldstein On Gelt Show, the financial show where we'll talk about how you can make the most of your money. With all the confusing financial chatter bombarding you each and every day, Goldstein On Gelt will give you the practical information you want and need about living a financially stable life. Here's your host, money maven Doug Goldstein.
Okay, we are back. We are talking to Dan Ariely, who is an Israeli professor of psychology and behavioral economics. He teaches now at Duke University and is the founder of the Center for Advanced Hindsight. Ariely studied physics and mathematics at Tel Aviv University. He also holds an MA and PhD in cognitive psychology from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and a PhD in business from Duke University. After obtaining his PhDs, he taught at MIT, and before returning to Duke University as the James D. Duke Professor of Psychology and Behavioral Economics. Apart from his prolific academic writing, he published two popular books, one titled Predictably Irrational, and the other titled The Upside of Irrationality, both of which became New York Times bestsellers. And I can tell you that in my own life as a financial advisor, I spend a lot of time talking to clients about irrationality and, in fact, about the work of Dan Ariely. So it is quite an honor to have you on the show, Dan.
Well, thank you very much. I have to say that my high school teachers who tried to teach me both English and literature were very surprised when this happened, that I got a book with a New York Times bestseller. Not to mention I got two.
That's amazing. And they are, in fact, truly amazing books.
Thank you.
You've said in your books that there are certain benefits to irrationality, which of course rubs people the wrong way. But I find clients who make very irrational and therefore poor investment decisions. They suffer from loss aversion or media bias or narrow framing. Yeah. So maybe you could tell us what do you mean by irrationality and why could it be good?
Okay, so first of all, I don't want to say that all irrationality is good. There's lots of it that is terrible, right? All the examples you make, and particularly when you think about the stock market and you think about long-term investment and all the things that get us to think short-term or in a narrow way or justify our past choices. But the other issue is to understand that rationality is not always optimal, and it mostly comes to play when we think about more social kind of living. So imagine, actually, where do you live?
I live in Efrat.
In Efrat. So imagine that everybody in your neighborhood, in your city, would be perfectly rational, which would mean that they would always just calculate the cost and benefit. And they would only do things that are good for them when the benefits outweigh the cost, and will never do it when the cost outweighs benefit. And the only thing that they would care about is maximizing their wallet or their wealth. Mm-hmm. How much fun would that be to live there? Mm. Presumably not that much, right? What would be the chance that you could leave your door open or to leave your car unlocked for a few minutes or to ask somebody to do a favor for you? So it turns out that if you think that people are always out there just for their own personal gain, and that's what always they would do, it's not a good model of reality. But thank God it's not the right model of reality, because it will be awful to live like this. Now, so on one hand, we find that people are too trusting and too reciprocal, or too nice to each other. On the other hand, what we find is that people are also too revengeful. And if somebody upsets you in a deep way, you're willing to go to lots of steps to make them suffer back because of that. And it turns out that both of these instincts, the instinct for trust and the instinct for revenge, are both irrational, but it also means that they are sensible. Because it's interesting to realize that as a society, we want a higher level of trust. We want it because it really helps lots of things. You can shake somebody's hand and you will trust that they will do what they've said they would do. And, when we write contracts with people, we can never specify all the possible details of what will happen unless it's an incredibly simple transaction. And we rely a lot on people's goodness, in essence. So it's good to have all this trust. And oddly, revenge help you sustain trust. So imagine the following. Imagine that you and I lived on a desert island, and imagine that I had something that you wanted. I had a mango, okay, and you really wanted my mango, and one day I was not tending to my mango, so you had a chance to go ahead and steal my mango. And imagine two cases. In case one, I'm a perfectly rational person. I only work by cost-benefit analysis. And then you might think, if I go ahead and take Dan's mango and run far away enough, Dan will do the cost-benefit analysis. How long will it take him to get a new mango? How long will it take him to chase me? And he would conclude that it's better to get a new mango. And under those conditions, you might go ahead and take my mango. But what if you thought that I was a revengeful person? That if I thought that you took my mango, it's not a question of cost-benefit analysis. It doesn't matter how long it will take me. I will hunt you down. I will spend days and nights hunting you down, and if I find you, I will not only take my mango, I'll take your bananas, maybe your goat, right? I'll really go all the way out. Ask yourself, in those conditions, what are the chances that you will actually take my mango to start with? And, so here's a situation where we say people are too trusting and people are too revengeful, but it's the revenge that actually helps sustain the trust.
I see. It's interesting what you said earlier, the example of writing contracts or shaking someone's hand, because certainly in my business, we move millions and millions of dollars just, on a phone call, right? And we say that your word is your bond. And also, it's very true what you said about contracts. I consider myself a real yeki, someone who's very meticulous about contracts. And on the other hand, it is true there's never a possibility to understand and to imagine every possibility. So I always tell people, when you're going to do business, I advise people about choosing financial advisors, but I always tell them that the important thing is to have a good relationship with your advisor, because no matter what the contract says, at the end of the day, it's just a piece of paper. It's really who you're working with.
Yeah, I'm very interested in cheating. I do lots of research on how people cheat and when they cheat more, and the role of conflicts of interest. And I've been interested in conduct, in professional code of ethics, and also in universities that use the honor code. And recently our law school decided to implement an honor code. And I went to talk to the dean of the law school about how they want their honor code to look like. And it was interesting. This is a law school, right? And they ended up with a decision that the honor code reads something like this. If you as a student do something that we as the faculty don't like, we will not let you go and take the bar exam. Like, completely is not specified at all.
Right.
And I said, how can you as lawyers do that? I said, I thought that you spend your whole life trying to get something to be more and more precise and exact and specific. And he said that they talked about it for a long time, but what they realized was that if they put something in it, inherently they also put stuff out of it. And he said they're not sure what they want in and what they want out, and they think that people's reasonableness about what is it to be an honorable person is much more general and accurate at what they can actually write down in the contract. And I think they're right, but it also kind of undermines the profession of law in a big way, right? Because it means that you and I kind of understand what it is to be a reasonable, honorable person, and the moment we start putting it out on paper, inherently there's going to be stuff that is going to be left out. There's going to be stuff that would allow for shortcuts and misbehavior and so on. And the question is, what bridges this gap? And I think in many cases it's basically the human connection, is the fact that we do care.
So in fact, it would be more rational to follow a contract and to write down all the rules. However, being that is somewhat impossible to in fact succeed that way, you're saying that people need this level of irrationality, which is the trusting that they give to one another in order just to progress with relationships and business relationships.
Yeah, there's another kind of interesting side to this, which is it really better? So think whether, if you had a chance to write a complete contract or incomplete contract, which one of them would be better? And we have this idea that we have two types of relationship. You have a social relationship and you have a market relationship. And what's interesting is that those two things usually don't combine, they clash. So imagine that I had a flat tire and I asked you for help. Say, hey, would you help me change the tire on my car? What's the chance you will do it? You can ask yourself, would you spend the half an hour to help me? But imagine case 2, and say, hey, would you help me change the tire in my car? I'll give you $5 for it. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about it right now? Do you say to yourself, gee, I get to help done plus I get $5? Mm-hmm. Not very likely. Most likely you say, oh, this is something I do for work. I don't work for $5. Give me $150, we can talk. What is interesting is that, and of course, if I give you $250, you would do it for me. But what is interesting is that when you sometimes add financial motivation, you don't add to the total motivation. You can actually distract from the social motivation.
That's interesting.
And what is interesting about this in the world of contract is, imagine that you and I have a handshake. What does it mean? And imagine that we, instead of having a handshake, we start putting it in a line-by-line contract. What happens to the basic trust that I have? Would it be possible that all of a sudden I say, you know what? You forgot to specify in the contract, and I will take advantage of you with higher likelihood. Mm-hmm. Whereas before, if it was just a handshake, it was unclear, I wouldn't have done it. But now that we've specified something, if you forgot to specify it, it's your fault, and I will take advantage of you.
I think that's the way things, in fact, look. We are talking to Dan Ariely, who is a Duke University professor and is the author of 2 very, very popular books, bestsellers, one titled Predictably Irrational and the other titled The Upside of Irrationality. Dan talks and speaks and lectures and writes about how people make irrational decisions and how it's not always such a bad idea to do that. So let me just follow up on an angle regarding how people invest. Many academic studies have shown that people who trade their own accounts statistically do considerably worse than if they just put the money into either a mutual fund or an index fund.
Yeah.
Yet they still want to try. What is it that makes people overvalue their own ability when clearly they're not able to compete?
So I think the word clearly there is kind of clearly from an outside perspective, right, when we look at the data, but it doesn't look clearly to the person who is doing that. And I think there's a couple of reasons for it. One is this belief in control. The same way that we feel incredibly safe when we're driving and we sit behind the wheel, we feel more safe than we're the passengers. Mm-hmm. We have this extra feeling that if we're driving, things are going to go okay because we know what we're doing. And most people believe that they're better drivers than average. Most people believe that they have less likelihood to die from a heart disease than average, and so on. So we think of ourselves as better than average, and on top of that, we have this feeling of control, that when we're in control, things are better. That, I think, is one part of the thing. The second thing is that people have this tremendous capacity to tell themselves stories after the fact, and then tell themselves that they believe these stories all along. Mm-hmm. So that's actually what we see on a daily basis when you see all these people on television tell you what happened in the stock market today.
Right.
We've done some kind of preliminary research on this. It turns out you can tell people any story. You can tell them the story and its opposite. And it doesn't matter because we tell ourselves stories and then we start believing them. We have this incredible capacity to see cause and effect. I mean, you look at the sky and you see some clouds, and very quickly you see, oh, this looks like a dog, and it's chasing this other cloud, and this little cloud is escaping. This big cloud is evil. I mean, we do all these stories, and in the stock market is no exception. It's very hard for us to say, you know what? There's a lot of randomness here, and I just don't understand what's going on. Mm-hmm. So we tell ourselves stories that try to explain what happens. And even though we're just telling a story about a random pattern, all of a sudden we start believing in it. And because we believe in it, we believe in our ability to explain ex-ante the stock market, not just ex-post. Mm-hmm. So we say, oh, look at me. I really understand what's going on. No, it's not really understanding. It's just that you can tell yourself a story after the fact about why you knew that all along. Our research center here, we call the Center for Advanced Hindsight.
Yeah, I was wondering about the name. I'm sorry, I meant to ask.
And the reason is exactly that, is because in hindsight, we are really fantastic. Just not so much ex-ante. And I think this ability to not see how we could have told ourselves just as good of a story if the results would have been the other way around makes it very difficult for us to really understand how much of the decision is random and how much we truly don't understand.
It's funny how you talk about the concept of hindsight, because when I'm sitting with clients, oftentimes they'll say, "Well, Doug, you're the president of an investment company. You must really understand what's going to happen in the markets." And I have a present that my very first sales assistant got me when I started in the business 20-something years ago. She got me a crystal ball that has all sorts of defects in it. And I always show it to my clients. I say, "Listen, my crystal ball is broken, so I can't tell you what's going to happen, but I'm really good at telling you what did happen."
Yes.
And, I try to get them to realize that there's no one, no matter how close you are to Wall Street or how far away, that has prophecy these days. And
unless you have inside trading. Legally, there's really very hard to understand what's going on. Illegally, it's a little easier.
Yeah. So sorry. That's not my space, but it's, that's why I tell people, listen, the best you can do is to try to diversify and plan and not roll the dice with your life savings on some hot tip. And especially in Israel, as I'm sure you know, it's a very small country, and everyone knows someone else who's working at the next high-tech company that's about to do something phenomenal, so you better buy the stock, and then before you know it, you get wiped out.
Yeah. I was in Canada a couple of weeks ago, and I met with a group of people who are doing behavioral economics for a big Canadian bank. Mm-hmm. And we met for drinks after work, and they told me that they just came out from an all-bank meeting, and they were so excited with what their bank is doing and how smart these people were, that they were going to go ahead and buy more options, more stocks of their own bank.
Wow.
And I said, "Haven't you learned anything?" I said, think about the amount of money that you have invested in your bank. Not just in options, but your own salary and your promotion and your bonuses. I said, it's enough. It's enough. You have a huge part of your portfolio already invested in this. Shouldn't you do something else?
That's what happened at Bear Stearns. All the people at Bear Stearns, it was a patriotism to buy shares of your own company.
That's right, but it's both patriotism, which of course the companies are trying to promote, because it's good for their own stock price, and probably kind of somewhat good for both morale and commitment. But from a diversification perspective, it's a nightmare. Mm-hmm. Like Shlomo Ben-Arzi actually has a very nice paper. He's showing that it's better to keep your money in money market from a risk perspective than put it in your own company's stock.
Mm-hmm. I hear it. That's from a diversification standpoint as well. I have to say, Dan, we're just about out of time. It's fascinating. We are talking with Dan Ariely, who is the author of the best-selling books Predictably Irrational and The Upside of Irrationality. He's currently teaching at Duke University, though he is an Israeli professor, and we certainly look forward to having you back here in Israel. Let me just ask one last question. Is there a way that people can follow your research or keep track of what you're doing?
Yes, I have a blog called danariely, DANARIELY.com, and I post updates all the time. I just wrote a little essay about what makes good gifts. I said that good gifts is something that you get people that eliminate guilt. So the idea is that there's a whole category of things that people really want, but they feel bad about buying it for themselves. So here's the last parting question. Imagine you walk down the street and you see something you really want. It's a cashmere sweater. Right. And you really want it, and you pass by and it's $500. And you say, I can't possibly justify this. And then you get home and you find out that your significant other bought it for you from your joint checking account. And ask yourself, how would you feel? Would you ask them to take it back because after all you made already the cost-benefit analysis and decide it's not worth it? Or would you be happy? Turns out everybody is happy because all of a sudden somebody else got the guilt out of your way and just gave you something you wanted. So this is my advice for the holiday season.
That is a phenomenal bit of advice, and it's very applicable to me, so I have to thank you because it is my wife's birthday now, and we've been talking about buying one of those robots that vacuums your floor, the little, like you read about in the airplane, a Roomba.
Yeah.
So we were going back and forth, and between you and me, I just bought her one. And so I guess I'm going to test your theory now to see if she's happy because I bought it from our joint checking account.
Very good.
So we'll see. Listen, Dan Ariely, I really appreciate the time you spent today. It is fascinating the work you're doing. I encourage everyone to keep track, to buy the books, to follow the blog, and I wish you luck with all of your research.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you in Israel next time.
See you soon.
You've been listening to the Goldstein on Gelt Show with money maven Doug Goldstein. Doug's weekly radio show is heard around the world, but if you miss it, you can download the podcast at www.goldsteinongelt.com. The Goldstein on Gelt Show gives you up-to-date financial ideas so you can get on the path to financial freedom. If you'd like your questions answered on the air or off, send Doug an email to doug@profile-financial.com. It's your money for your future, so join Doug every week to build your wealth on the Goldstein on Gelt Show.